Yeah, go live. So we are live on YouTube as well. All right. So welcome everyone, guys. And yeah, here am I, Lsecq, and here is my guest. So I'm gonna let you introduce yourself. It's your turn.
Hey, I'm Scotty. You can find me online as Checkymender. I am a red teamer at Sony. I've been doing offensive security for about 9 years, and red teaming has been 6 of that.
Welcome. Nice. So a lot of red team in there. And with that being said, we're gonna dive right into the main topic of today's video, which is about showcasing the Athena agent itself. And my guest is actually an active developer. I can say the main developer of that agent there. So if anyone knows how that thing really works and all the things deep inside, that's the guy. So I'm giving the word to you, my man, and show us some insight about the Athena agent itself.
Yeah, of course. Thanks a lot for having me on. So Athena is a cross-platform .NET agent that I created probably a couple years ago. Um, the reason that I chose Mythic was because I found out that I really enjoyed the actual agent creation of malware, but I really didn't enjoy the team server portion of it. Creating the front ends, identifying the task structure, all things like that. It just wasn't really for me. I found I was more interested in creating the actual TTPs rather than all of the stuff that you need to have like a really cool C2 framework. So then Cody came out with Mythic, and it was an agent agnostic framework. He handled all the front end stuff. I didn't have to worry about any of that, and I could just focus on the part that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I'm the same kind of guy. Hate the front end.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally get you, my man.
And for anyone that follows me on Twitter, or anyone who knows me in real life, they know I'm a really big C# developer. It's my favorite language to work with. I just love how quickly I could just during operations, I'm always just like throwing together random tools to help us succeed in our operations. And a lot of times those tools end up becoming plugins in Athena.
So you kind of
So
get forward me because I was going to ask, I mean, how many programming languages do you know and what you enjoy the most? But you already answered that. So you can say more like how much else do you know and how much else do you use, by the way?
for the most part, I have a general understanding of, for a lot of programmers out there, like once you learn one of the languages, you kind of understand a lot of them. It's just like the specific syntax of that language, how it works. So I can probably read most languages outside of like Golang. I can't really read that well. Um, but I'd say the ones that I'm really proficient in would be the .NET languages, so C#, PowerShell, Python, and I do know like a okay amount of C++.
Yeah, I mean, C++ is a language that people are coding for 5 years and still don't know it. So if you know this and C++, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. C++ I think is probably about as low as I'm gonna go. I don't have any desire to learn C. I don't know.
So this agent is built in C#.NET Core, right?
Yes. So
Why?
there are
Why?
two. So as I said before, I'm a really big fan of the .NET programming language, and so initially when I created this, they had just released .NET Core 3.0, I believe. And the main draw with that is it was the C# language that I knew, but I could bring that over to pretty much any other operating system. So it's cross-platform. It works for Windows, it works for Linux, it works for Mac. Heck, it even works for like Android and certain embedded systems.
So in order for this agent to work, does the client needs to have .NET Core runtime, or you can compress it in some way?
So yeah, there's a couple of ways that the agent can be, compiled, right? So Microsoft is already aware that not everyone's going to have .NET Core installed. So it's called just regular .NET. They rebranded as Microsoft does. So now it's just called .NET, and then whatever number is the current one. The current number is .NET 7. Um, so there are multiple different ways that these agents can be compiled. So this is a little bit out of date. The numbers have changed. So
Yeah.
the yeah, so just like Golang binaries, you can build .NET agents, so .NET 7 agents, as self-contained, right? This means that the .NET runtime is included inside of the executable.
Which
so that
most
you can
likely
run this.
result in pretty much large file, right?
Yes. So it means you don't have to have the runtime installed on the host in order to run it, but it does lead to a very large file,
So the
as you
whole
said.
runtime is in the executable itself.
Exactly.
All right.
So the nice thing about it is a lot of people were complaining about large binary sizes. So Microsoft did offer a bunch of different compilation options that allow you to control the size a little bit. So you have your standard self-contained single file uncompressed executable, right? That's going to come out to about 65 megabytes. That includes the full .NET runtime, every library you're going to need, the agent, it's all right there.
That's a lot.
So yeah, it's
That's
a
a lot.
pretty big binary.
Yeah.
So Microsoft added the ability to compress the binary, and every time that they up the .NET version, the compression gets better and better. So in this case, you can see the 63 megabyte binary, and the new version at 65. When compiled with the full .NET runtime and compressed, it actually goes down to 33 megabytes.
Which is like about 50%, which is
Yeah.
a big of a difference.
So
Yeah.
it's a pretty significant savings, which is really nice. But then on top of that, you can even trim a little bit more off of that. So there's the concept of trimmed executables.
So you can
So
trim
like
different
Microsoft,
functions, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of compilers, they do this. Like if they see you're not using a function, they don't compile it and they get rid of it. And this is the same concept, right? So the trimmed executable will remove any .NET runtime libraries that just aren't being used. Now, this does lead to some issues when it comes to reflection. Are you familiar with .NET Reflection?
Yeah. I think I am, but
Yeah.
you can know it better. So
Yeah.
you
So
can
for
feel free
anyone
to give
who,
us so you can feel free to give us some details about it.
yeah, for anyone who's not familiar with .NET Reflection, it allows you to execute .NET assemblies in memory without dropping the files to disk. So as long as you have the .NET runtime, you can send the binary over as a byte array, load it in memory, execute the code, and return the output, all without dropping a disk.
And
It's
now
the primary.
we have already
Go ahead.
spoke about that, but I think it's gonna be a nice idea to explain to the public. So that is the difference between .NET Framework assemblies and .NET Core assemblies.
Yeah, and so that's the main thing with the change between .NET Core and .NET Framework. So .NET Framework comes pre-installed on pretty much every Windows distribution you're going to get, but .NET Core doesn't. And while they are similar in a lot of ways, a lot of the code is reusable. They also can't directly be run in each other's runtimes. So, for example, we have a lot of executables out there in red teaming: Seatbelt, Rubius, Sharp Deep Happy, all of those fun ones.
Yeah.
They're all built using .NET Framework, which is really useful for Windows binaries. But they can't be directly loaded in the .NET Core runtime because of the fact that the IL, which is the interpreted language, has changed between the different runtimes. So it's not a one-to-one comparison. For
So
example,
do we need to have different assemblies which are built on .NET Core, or we have some kind of way of modifying them so they can run in .NET Core environment, for instance, your agent?
so it depends on the assembly. A lot of assemblies you can just retarget for .NET Core, compile it, and you won't have any issues. There are just some that will have those issues. For example, anything that uses the system.directory-services.active directory library, so a lot of really popular AD-based red teaming tools. That's going to be like sharp hound, some functions of sharp deep happy, same with some functions of seatbelt. They won't be able to be directly converted / run in .NET Core because that library just doesn't exist anymore, because it uses a bunch of like
Oh, I
Windows
see.
COM objects.
In that case, how we can end up running them in an engagement?
Yeah, so that was a that was a pretty big issue that I found that a lot of people didn't realize when for the people that have run Athena. So I worked on creating so I have an inject shellcode command that allows you to inject shellcode in a an injected process and execute it there and get the output. So I wrote a wrapper around that and using Donut so that you can inject .NET Framework assemblies as shellcode into a sacrificial process, so that you can still have all the capabilities of running .NET framework executables like Sharphound, Ruby, Seatbelt, all of those fun ones. But you wouldn't have to worry about painstakingly converting all of their Active Directory functions into raw LDAP.
So as I got you correctly, you're using shellcode execution toward the assemblies which are not capable to be run as .NET Core.
Exactly.
All right,
Yes.
nice, smart choice, nice.
Yeah. During operations, I have been using Athena a lot lately, just because it's not as used, and plus a lot of the code. One of the advantages of huge binary sizes like this is the fact that any AV provider is going to look at a 60 meg file and go, fuck that, and not scan it, right?
Yeah.
And even if they do scan it, like 99% of it is just .NET runtime. So it's going to look at it and like, this is a fucking Microsoft binary. Who cares?
So do you think the evasiveness comes from the huge file size or from the .NET Core itself? Because maybe SAVC's .NET Core application maybe thinks it's safer in some way?
Yeah, with the evasion, it's kind of a little bit of all of it, right? The more known code inside of a binary, the less likely it's going to flag antivirus. The bigger the binary it is, the less effort an antivirus provider is going to put into looking at it, because nobody wants their system to slow down because they're scanning an assembly.
Yeah, yeah.
And on top of that, Athena is not quite as popular as things like Apollo or Sliver or Cobalt Strike, so it's not as used and not as many people are looking for it.
Yeah.
Plus,
When I was testing that in my previous video where it does not have all the things it can do now, I achieved like super low detection rate, like 1 or 2 out of 2069 this kind, which was ridiculous.
yeah,
Without modification, without
convenient.
anything. Yeah.
I've had people that are like, yeah, I just dropped Athena.exe on disk and it was fine, nothing popped. And I'm like, cool. You shouldn't do that, but good to hear.
So how do you drop files when they are that huge, like 60 or 30 megabytes?
How do I dump files?
Yeah, how do you drop them into a targeted environment?
Oh, I mean, it's gonna depend on the pretext. Because of the binary is so large, you don't want to do something like shoving the entire binary as shellcode inside of a loader, because it's just going to be massive and it's not going to work. So one of the downsides with .NET 7 single file executables is the way they work is essentially, once it's loaded in memory, it keeps a handle on the actual executed file. And anytime it needs a specific DLL, it goes into that file, finds the DLL, pulls it out, and loads it. Now, this makes it a problem when you try to convert things to shellcode, because the shellcode loads it into a sacrificial process, but then when the .NET runtime tries to get a handle to the file that it's running in, it doesn't find any of the things that it's looking for. So a big downside to Athena is, as of right now, at the very least, it can't be converted to shellcode.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, Wover and I, we've been working on trying to figure out a way to make it possible. We just haven't succeeded yet.
I see. In that case, can you show us how it looks like now? Because as I mentioned in my previous video, it did not have a lot of commands, and I couldn't really do much with it, but I see there were a lot of updates about it. So can you just walk you through how you generate payload, with what different types you can generate it in a payload, and
Sure.
how it works? Yeah.
So the nice thing about Athena is it allows me to do the parts that I find fun about malware development in an easy and fast way. So Athena supports multiple different of the Mythic C2 profiles that are available to Mythic. And as you can see, it supports, as of right now, the tested ones are Linux, Red Hat, Windows, and Mac OS. The reason Red Hat is slightly different than Linux is because there's some gotchas when it comes to running .NET Core executables on Red Hat that I needed to take into account. So I just split that off into a separate one.
I see.
So in this case, we'll be generating it for Windows. As far as the build parameters, you can either output it as an exe or source parameter. That's kind of these are a lot of the similar ones as you showed in your video previously.
Yeah.
This creates the single file binary. So this means it basically shoves everything into one file and spits out an exe. Otherwise, your EXEs will look something like this. Let me just pull it out real quick. So otherwise, when you compile it, it'll look something like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
with
you
the PB,
see the
with, yeah,
DLLs.
with the PDB and JSON and so on.
Yeah, and the .exe is not the actual code. The .NET exe is essentially a wrapper that just runs the DLL. So the main core of your code is going to be in this DLL.
So by checking this option, all that is equating to the exe itself.
Yes, exactly.
And what's going to happen if you choose to provide a source code instead of exe, and then you specify this option there?
So if you specify source instead of an exe and press that option, it doesn't really do anything because the source just stops before any compilation happens and just spits out the entire binary as a big source file, right?
And
So if you wanted to like make some changes.
And why did you decide to have a source code as the output? What's the advantages of that?
It initially came out as debugging because I was trying to troubleshoot why
it's
why
a feature.
certain
Now it's a feature.
yeah now it's a feature, right? Originally it was a debugging thing, and then I kind of thought to myself, this would actually be kind of useful in case somebody wanted to like run an obfuscator on the code or do their custom obfuscation or add anything. And so I figured, source code would be super useful. Plus there's also this other feature that you probably saw it in your previous test, but I've since removed it because it's kind of sketchy, and I don't want to fully support it at this moment. But you're able to compile Athena binaries as something called native AOT. Which native AOT allows you to take that .NET runtime, that C# code, and it compiles it down to native. So it essentially compiles it down to C++ or C code. And that has the advantage that you get smaller binaries, they're quicker, it's all ahead of time compiled. And that's kind of what Sean and I are exploring in terms of getting Athena loaded via shellcode. We think that's probably going to be our best option for that.
Nice. All right, cool.
So the next one indicates whether the payload will include the full .NET framework. Like I said, that's going to be your self-contained file.
Why is .NET framework there and not the... Are you referencing the .NET framework there or the core thing?
I should probably change that to say .NET runtime instead of .NET framework, but that's just, from when I first wrote it.
All right, I got it. All right.
Sorry, this first one was compressed, not single file.
So the first option has to be with the second option, right? They go hand by hand, as far as I get it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all three of these kind of go hand in hand.
Okay.
If you have a single file binary, compress it, and then if you're including the full .NET runtime, then you're gonna want to compress it.
So most likely it's gonna be best if you have just one slide that says like a final binary and so on.
Yeah. And this one is off by default just because it does cause some issues with reflection.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you go ahead and run execute assembly with a binary that references something that gets trimmed out due to the fact that Athena doesn't use it by default, it will error out saying that it's not able to find that library.
So this is the option where on your GitHub it says trimmed, where it pretty much like removes different functions to make it less heavy in terms of space.
Yeah, it makes it a lot smaller. It makes it down to about 11 megabytes versus the original 60.
Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a lot. That's a lot of space saving, and that kind of puts it on par with like Golang assemblies or Golang executables.
Mm-hmm.
And these ones are pretty obvious. Release debug. Debug is nice if you're just testing in an environment. It prints out different messages to the debug stack, so you can load it via Visual Studio and see the debug messages to see what's broken, see what's working. And then target architecture. .NET Core supports multiple different architectures: x64, x86, ARM, Muscle, ARM64, and those are the main ones that I've tested on and officially support. It does theoretically work on other ones, but I just haven't really tested them.
I see.
So go ahead and hit next. A big component of Athena was that I wanted to make it so that all of the commands could be loaded after compilation. So this has the advantage that it saves on size of the file, so you're not getting. I mean,
Can you a little
saves
bit
as
dive
much
deeper
size
into
as
that one?
possible.
So can you explain that in a little bit more details?
Yeah. So like I said before, .NET can use something called reflection to load DLLs in memory, execute the code, and then return the output. So every Athena command is its own self-contained DLL that doesn't have to be compiled in and can be loaded after the fact.
All right.
So there are certain commands that are built in
Mhm.
that I just was not able to do via reflection right now. For example, stuff that requires internal stuff like sleep, jitter, list profiles, load assembly,
So that's why they
socks
are
token.
required in the agent.
Yeah, so they're all going to be built in.
Mhm.
And then there's these ones that can all be loaded. So you can select which ones you want. So say you only want okay, I just want PS, I just want
So
shellcode.
all the left-hand side commands are used in reflection, right?
All the left-hand side commands can be loaded. After the fact. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So after you select your commands, go ahead and hit next, and you
Can
can
I
select what C2 profile you want to
can
support.
I interrupt you for a second? Can you go back for a little bit and explain the different commands? Because when I was testing the agent, you had let's say 10 commands. Now you have a lot more. So for instance, was that caffeine thing and so on?
Yeah, one of the downsides of being me is I do a lot of my development work in the dev branch. So the dev branch is always a lot more full featured. And I honestly hadn't pushed to that main branch in maybe a year and a half. So there had been a lot of changes to Athena that I wasn't quite ready to release when you made that previous video. So some of the main things is that I added a fuck ton of commands, right? So I've got caffeinate, which does as it says. It pretty much keeps the agent alive, keeps the screen from locking.
Oh, nice.
We have this. What's that?
Yeah, so I just said nice. How do you use some kind of Windows APIs to keep it running or any kind of...
So this has gone through two different versions. The first version I liked a little bit better as it was more. I liked it was more finesse. It actually used the Windows API to keep the thread state open, and so kind of like what browsers do when you're watching a video, so that your screen doesn't lock. However, during testing, we found out it didn't work all the time. So Caffeinate 2.0 actually just sends a key press every minute.
Oh, nice. If it works, it works. Don't touch it.
Yeah, it works really nice. It's a key. We press a key that's not on most keyboards. I think it's F13 or something like that. And it's a supported key, but it doesn't always exist, and in most cases it's not going to do anything. And that way, we can still keep the computer alive, and we've tested it on a bunch of different boxes, and it's really worked out well.
I see. Nice. Good job on that. What about the commands that are not available to be transferred on the right? So, for instance, the ADCS enum, add users to group and so on. So, what are these?
A lot of these blurred out ones are because they're actually commands that are wrapped via other commands. So one of the really cool things about Mythic is you can create commands that delegate tasks to the agent. So one of the big things that I added to Athena since you last tested it was the cough command, which if you're a Cobalt Strike user, you'll know it as the BOF command, beacon object file.
All right.
So a lot of these grayed out commands are actually beacon object files that get loaded via the cough command.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So while they can't be loaded directly, if you load the cough command, they will be loaded with it.
Perfect. So that's the cough command, yeah. Yep. All right. So what about the crop thing?
So have you heard of farmer and crop?
No, no.
Let me find it real quick. It's from MDSec Active Breach.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Farmer. It's created by Dominic Schell. And it allows you to collect net MTLM hashes by dropping LNK files on shares.
Oh, the kind of relay to LDAP stuff where you get the hash. Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Exactly.
All right. Nice.
And so during my operations, I use it a lot. And I found it to be really helpful during operations. And so I reached out to Dominic and I asked him, is it okay if I include this as like a built-in command in Athena? He's like, yeah, sure, go for it. And so
Sweet.
I modified it so that it supports Athena's plugin format, and I now have it as a first-party command. So no having to
Sweet.
worry about, okay, do I have to convert it to .NET Core? Can I load it via inject assembly? Or can I load it via execute assembly? It's just right there. It's just a command now.
Nice. Good job. Alright, so most of them are kind of intuitive, but I see Farmer there.
Yeah.
So is it the same thing or different version of some case?
Yeah, so Farmer is the actual server that collects the hashes. Crop is the one that drops the LNK.
Aha, alright. Nice. What about the
And the next one's
DS Connect and DS Query?
Yeah, so I do I did a lot of operation. I did a lot of operating in the pre-Power View days. So one of my most used commands was something called DS Query, which it essentially is. It's like Power View, but you create all your LDAP commands manually. And that's kind of how I've created Athena around. So I created this DS command, which allows you to run raw LDAP queries against a domain controller. The advantage with this DS command is it's cross-platform. You can run it on Linux, Mac, or Windows, versus something like...
So that means if the Linux machine is domain connected, you can still run that to get domain info about it.
It doesn't even have to be domain connected. It just has to be able to view a domain controller.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it has to have like a specific library installed, but a lot of common Linux distros already have it installed.
I see.
And so DS Connect and DS Query are just some convenient wrapper functions that go around the DS command. Because you have to initially bind against the DS or the domain controller before you can actually run anything against it.
Yeah.
Get clipboard, pretty standard stuff, allows you to get the clipboard contents.
Yeah. env, what about the env? Get the environment variable of the user?
Yeah, envs, get the environment variables, get sessions. That allows you to use the Windows 32 API to enumerate sessions on a remote host.
Oh.
It's really useful against file shares because you can see like who's logged in from where. And so during a red team, when you're user hunting, say you're looking for a specific user that Bloodhound says is vulnerable to, or allows you to get domain admin access, that's going to be a way that you can find them. You can run get sessions against a file share.
I see.
Get shares, pretty common. Get shares against the host. Inject assembly and inject shellcode. They're going to be running the same. Inject assembly converts a PE or .NET executable to shellcode and then calls inject shellcode on the agent itself. Keylogger built in, so you can record keystrokes. That's another one of my big use cases. I love silent red teaming, where I pretty much just listen as much as possible before doing anything.
Yeah, that's the whole point of red teaming, I believe.
Exactly. So patch is actually deprecated. I just have it there. I need to get rid of it.
What it was
when you run it, it says, when you run it, it says it's deprecated. It's actually been replaced by Patch It, which is a buff that patches ETW and AMC.
Oh, I see.
PWD, Reg, RM.
Standard stuff there.
These are all screenshot, SSH. So you can actually connect to an SSH service through Athena and execute commands. Same with SFTP. So if you say you're on a box and a user has an SSH key and they commonly log into an SSH box that you want to run commands against, you don't have to spin out Chisel and proxy your traffic into the session. You can just do it all through the agent.
Whoa. Nice.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about .NET is it has so many different libraries that pretty much you can do anything you want.
Amazing.
So once you pick your commands, go and hit next.
One final question about the commands. One final question. Sorry. How does it affect the final size of the binary, depending on how much commands you add? For instance, if you add all of them, so are we gonna get like a lot bigger file? And
so you will get a bigger file. The size of it obviously is going to depend on what ones you include and what they need. But honestly, compared to the size of like the actual agent itself, it's not going to be that much bigger.
All right. Yeah.
Maybe like an extra meg at most, but I don't even think it's going to be that much.
I see.
So each plugin kind of has this format to it. So let me bring up an easy one. So all of them implement, so technically this is a class, but the class implements the interface,
Mhm.
but an iPlugin interface, so they have to have three different things, or two different things. They have to have their name, they have to provide their name, so
Mhm.
that's going to be their .env, and then they have to have an execute function that returns void.
And that's some interface function, right? Because you override it.
Yep.
Oh, I see. All right.
And so when the execute is called, each plugin has access to this Athena.commands library,
Mhm.
and that's how it returns data to Mythic.
Oh, I
So
see.
it's going to have this task response handler.write,
Mhm.
and every time it's that's called, output is getting sent to Mythic.
To the Mythic
So
server.
the nice thing about
Yeah, yeah.
the
All
Mythic
right. All
server.
right.
The nice thing about that is that allows me to support long-running commands. So something like a keylogger or something like, farmer, right? They're constantly running in memory and they're returning multiple tasks. So I can't just have the function return. So it just sends the code to the agent. The agent's like, oh, I have something to return, and it returns it.
How do you handle big output?
Um,
If it's not enough for one callback to retrieve all the output.
so right now I don't, outside of
Nice.
upload and download. But theoretically, in the future, the reason I don't is just because I haven't had a need to,
Mhm.
outside of something like upload or download, which does chunking. But Mythic does have hooks that support it that allow me to chunk task output and return it that way.
I didn't see a PowerShell import functions. Does it support it?
So it does not currently have any like PowerShell functions. I looked into adding it, but all of the requirements to run PowerShell in .NET practically doubled the size of Athena.
Oh, yeah, that's why.
And I was like,
Yeah.
nah.
So for instance, if I want to use PowerView, am I stick to the DS stuff, or I have some kind of tricky way of executing it?
Yeah, so if you wanted to use PowerView, I would just recommend taking a look at the PowerView function, seeing what LDAP query it uses, and then just using that through DS.
I see. Yeah.
That's one of the main things that I plan on doing more with some of these queried commands. So DS connect and DS query, they all call the DS command under the hood.
Mhm.
So I was thinking of adding more PowerView like commands such as get domain users or get domain groups that would do the same thing. It would just call DS with the specified LDAP query and provide that data for you,
I
just
see.
to make it easier.
I see. Yeah, and by the way, PowerShell is easy with fact, so it's good after all to avoid it. Yeah.
So
All right.
Athena supports a bunch of different C2 profiles. That's another thing that I really enjoy writing. I really enjoy writing external C2 profiles. So if you're familiar with the C3 project,
C3,
I
no.
really like.
Can you tell me more about it?
Yeah, so the C3 project, I forget who it was created by because I think they just got bought out. But it's with Secure Labs, and it's basically a platform agnostic C2 communication framework, right?
Mhm.
So they have a concept called relays, and the relays can communicate with each other over different supported channels. So
Oh,
they have
Mr. Slag.
Mattermost.
Oh, yeah, I get it now. So you have not
Yeah,
communicated with the agent via directly to your server, but you go to some kind of third-party provider, like Slack, Discord, and
exactly.
so on. Oh, that's why it's
Exactly. And
C3. Nice.
I find those really fun to write. Like I just enjoy finding different APIs that can be used for C2.
Yeah.
So between me and my team, we've implemented 2 into Mythic, specifically Slack and Discord.
So for instance, you're gonna need to have Discord channel, like token for the server and so on.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you would
Perfect.
generate a Discord token. You would so a bot token. Then you would indicate what channel you wanted to communicate through, and then the agent would just use that channel as C2.
Yeah.
I plan on improving that in the future because right now the agent portion of Discord does polling, so it calls the API every minute or so, depending on your sleep time. But I'd like to set it up so it's more like the SMB profile, so that it just sits and waits
Wait.
for a call. waits for tasking.
When you go for a third-party provider like Discord, does it somehow trim the functionality of your agent? Can you do the same stuff as you were connecting directly?
Yeah, you can do the same stuff as you can do through HTTP or WebSocket. The main drawback with Discord is the limit of the file sizes.
Mhm.
So depending on what you're returning or what you're sending over to the agent, that and rate limiting, right? You may encounter some weirdness if you're sending over like a 30 gig file, right?
Yeah, I see.
But if you're sending over massive files like that, I probably would recommend you use WebSocket instead.
So, for instance, it's being hard to pretty much transfer data back and forth using Discord, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Because Discord, since it's a public API, they have rate limiting.
Mhm.
So, a 30 gig file put into different chunks is going to be a fuck ton of requests.
Oh,
and so
yeah,
you're going to hit
yeah,
your rate
yeah.
limit.
I see.
Yeah.
So today what we're going to showcase HTTP, I believe, or
So
what have you prepared?
today I'm going to focus on SMB
Mhm.
and WebSocket.
All right.
The really cool thing about Mythic is you can predefine your instances. So when you click this and you have it set to none, we'll do it with WebSocket. You have to fill this in every time,
Mhm.
which gets annoying, especially if you're trying to debug things. So instead, you can click this,
Yeah.
and it'll predefine your instance with whatever you have set. So you hit
Meeting 3.0
next.
for the win.
Yeah, exactly. So Athena files get downloaded as .zip files. So you create the payload. On my Mythic server, for some reason, I'm not getting any notifications, but you'll get a notification that
Yeah.
says your payload was sent to be built, and it'll start building here.
I've
So
been
I've already
thinking of
pre-built.
integrating the same build progress as Apple. So, for instance, when you generate Apple agent, it says generating code and go into the donut and so on. Have you thought about
Yeah.
generating that in Athena?
Yeah, I need to do that. It's on my list. I just have not implemented it yet.
I see.
So it's on the to-do list. Do not worry.
All right. Just asking.
So yeah, no.
Appreciate the effort.
I want to run it, so do not worry. So I already went ahead and generated that because sometimes the compilation process does take a little while because it is pretty big.
So before the demo, can you go over how do you set up the SMB or the WebSocket thing so we can actually have some client connect to us?
Yeah, so as of right now, I don't have it set up through any redirectors. But if you take a look at the configuration for WebSocket, I pretty much use the default for my test environment. So bind address is 8081, connects to the WebSocket
SL,
URA.
Oh, all right. Nice.
Yeah.
So that's
I don't have any SSL or anything.
Yeah, all right. Good.
And then you can see that reflected inside the payload details. So you see it's connecting back to this server on this port at this endpoint.
So just by installing the WebSocket, the HTTP, sorry about that. So by installing the WebSocket profile, only need to just adjust the IP and that's it, right?
Exactly.
All right. Good.
Well, yeah, unless you change the endpoint. If you want to change the endpoint, then you would need to specify the specific endpoint too.
I see. All right.
At port. So for example, during an actual operation, you're not going to want to. So it's bad OPSEC to directly expose your C2 server on the internet. So on Twitter, you'll see a lot of people say like, "Oh, I found this C2 server. I found this C2 server." That's terrible OPSEC. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be implementing something called redirectors, which are basically just like custom Nginx or Apache web servers that listen out on AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, wherever you prefer it. And they'll take the traffic, confirm if it's legitimate C2 traffic, and then redirect it to the Mythic server that you have hosted elsewhere.
But following the logic, if you're using different kind of C2 profiles, you most likely need to do different configs. Like if you're using CSMB, it does not work with Nginx web server.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So the main time you're going to be using redirectors is when you're using WebSockets or HTTP. If you're using Slack or Discord, Slack and Discord are going to essentially be your redirectors.
Yeah. So you're avoiding SMB during the operations, right? Or how do you feel about that?
I am a big fan of SMB during operations. You'll see why in a second. So outbound SMB, no, you're never. I mean, you shouldn't find that. I'm not going to say you're never going to find it because I know people who have found outbound SMB in an environment. But SMB is my favorite communications channel to use intra-network because it's so difficult it's so difficult to capture that kind of traffic internally because everything's communicating over SMB. People are accessing file shares, people are downloading files, people are contacting DCs, right? And they're all doing this over SMB.
But often the SMB server is being disabled going outside. So how do you handle that, and how do you make sure that it's actually not?
Yeah, so right now SMB, well, I don't have any specific checks to make sure that the SMB isn't going out of the network. I kind of leave that to the operator because the operator should know better.
Mm.
So SMB is a peer-to-peer profile in Mythic. What that means is Mythic doesn't have a listener for it, so it doesn't directly communicate with anything via SMB, but it receives each message as what's called a delegate.
So that
And so
means
you'll
no
have,
session is created, right?
yeah.
All right. All right.
So you'll essentially have one egress point. So that's going to be your WebSocket. That's going to be your HTTP. That's going to be your Slack, your Discord, whatever.
Mhm.
That's going to be your egress point. And so once you have that, everything else internally is going to communicate via that egress point.
Okay.
So for example, I pre-created a couple SMB ones, but I'll go through the SMB creation process real quick with you.
Mhm.
So go ahead and generate an SMB agent. So you want to select what specific named pipe you want. That's really the only configuration you need to set.
Oh. And does
A
it
lot
has
of
to
people
be
really
having
like
a syntax, or just random name works?
a lot of people like to use Mojo syntax. So if you're familiar with like how Chromium works, Chromium opens up a lot of named pipes.
Oh.
And you can actually enumerate the named pipes on your system by using PowerShell. So you would just run this PowerShell command right here.
Mhm.
And
Phew.
this will list like all of the ones that you have. Right?
I see now, yeah.
Yeah. So you see how there's so many like Mojo ones?
Mhm.
So that's how Chromium does a lot of IPC. And so a lot of red teamers, a lot of APTs, they set their named pipes to follow the same format.
I see.
Because you can't really write a detection for it, or at least I don't know how you would write a detection for it, unless you understand how the names are generated.
So it has to be the same format, but not the exact same entity, right?
Yeah,
All
exactly.
Right. I see.
So for this example, I just put it on a pipe called Checky Pipe, because I just wanted to make sure that I knew what it was.
Mhm.
Let me just make sure that my SMB agents are running. For demo purposes, I'm just running them directly. In a lot of cases, you'd be running this via some kind of lateral movement method. For example, in your last video, you talked about sharp no PS exec.
Yeah.
So you would execute it using that. So as you see, it's listening, it's running right now. And if we list the pipes, we can see my agent pipe right here.
Yeah.
So then we can go back to Mythic and we can go ahead and run the link command. So if we do help link, it gives us the information of what we need to run. So we say, okay, link hostname pipe name. Super easy.
Oh, nice.
So link, in this case,
the current agent now is via SMB, right?
The current agent right now is via WebSocket. If you go here, you can view the graph layout and you'll see, okay,
yeah.
this callback 13 is calling back via WebSocket.
Okay.
So this is going to be my egress agent. So say I were to fish into a network and I got somebody to run my payload. This would be the payload that's running,
that.
calling back.
Yeah. I get it now. All right.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say I was able to compromise a SQL server, right?
Mhm.
So I was able to run my SMB agent. So it's really nice to be able to connect via SMB to a server, because that's going to look legitimate on a network. In a lot of cases, a client machine connecting to a server over SMB isn't going to set off any alarms. So this is the host name, link host name, and then the pipe name. So check commander pipe. Just want to make sure I got that right.
So the pipe should already be present on the system, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
So to save time, I already put it on the system. I already ran it.
Yeah.
And I tasked Athena to connect with the agent. And so we'll go ahead and let it connect back, and you'll see we have a connection with the MS SQL server on that host inside the same domain. And if we take a look at the graph, we can see, okay, so MS SQL callback 14 is connected to callback 13 over SMB. And then that's callback is connected to Mythic with the WebSocket.
So all your future callbacks is gonna be called to the 13 callback and then to the Mythic server.
Exactly.
Nice.
And that has the advantage that in a lot of environments, if you have a bunch of different random workstations doing a lot of connections to one specific server, that's going to set off some alarms in mature enough environments.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to limit the amount of egress that you have during an operation.
I see. So not spawning like a lot of beacons.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And in a mature enough organization, you don't want to be spawning like a shit ton of beacons because you're going to get caught.
Mm-hmm.
One of the interesting thing about SMB beacons is that they don't do check-ins. So they just sit, they wait, they listen for tasks. So that's going to limit the amount of traffic on the network, and it's going to make our C2 a little bit more stealthy.
Oh, nice. One more question about the link stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So from where does it get the credentials to authenticate to the SAB and perform the lateral movement itself?
So by default, it'll use your current user context.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're on a Windows server and you're logged in so in this case, we're logged in as Checkemander, which is like my dev account. If you have permissions to do it, then you'll connect to it. Mm-hmm. Actually, the pipe that gets set is set to an anonymous pipe, so anyone can connect to it.
I see. Is it a chance for you to specify the credentials for any other user?
Yeah, so Athena supports token impersonation on Windows servers, so you can run the token command. I'll run that in a second, which will allow you to change what context you're in.
Oh, nice.
So I just set up another link with the DC.
Mm-hmm.
So the nice thing about this is I'm connected to the DC in my domain, but my DC isn't calling out to my website. Instead, it's calling back to a server who's then calling out to my client, who's then calling out to Mythic. So that's going to make it a lot more stealthy in an environment so that you don't have to, because if a DC is calling out to a website, like especially one, say your redirector is set to like crazy, crazy worldstarvideos.com, right?
Yep.
What DC is going to make connections out to that? Not many of them. And so the less servers that are directly calling out to the internet, the better from an OffSec perspective.
Right. So you just have to keep the beacons alive, right? Because if any of the beacon dies, all the other beacons on the chain is gonna die as well, right?
No. Oh. So one of the big things that I wanted to implement in this is redundancy. So say this beacon were to die, right? You would be able to reconnect to this agent, and the new egress agent would call back out to Mythic, letting it know that, okay, from now on, these callbacks are coming through me now instead of someone else.
Nice.
So once they lose connection, they don't die. They just sit there and wait until they get a new callback.
Nice. Is it a special case of setting up a new egress point? Is it complicated, or just spawning a new beacon is enough?
Just spawning the beacon's enough.
Nice. All right.
So let's go ahead and load cough so we can show how some of the beacons are run, or the beacon object files are run. By default, I wrote wrappers around a lot of very common ones provided by Lsecqt and Outflank.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the big ones are like Wimi Query, SCenum, ADC SCenum, NanoRubius, Patchit, etc., etc. A lot of these will handle the conversion of the beacon object file to the cough format, and it'll allow you to run it on the agent. So now that we have cough running, we can type help and we can see what cough commands are available. So we have netview, vssenum, askcreds, there's a lot of them. So like, let's say askcreds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a BOF that'll pop up a fake login credential box for the user, and it'll request, it'll ask them to type in their password. Super useful for when you're getting really frustrated.
Yeah.
So if you type askcreds, can I have it? It'll compile the BOF for you, and then it'll delegate to the cough command. It'll say, okay, send the cough with these arguments and run it. So right now it's running. And if we take a
each
look,
time you run both, it's being compiled on as soon as you run it, right?
yeah, it's being compiled and it's being executed. So if you look at it on the box, on the user, we'll see, okay, hey, can I have your credentials?
That's
And
epic, man.
so, yeah, so we'll type like, okay, super secret, and we'll hit OK, and it'll just like close, and so the user won't even think about it. They'll be like, okay, cool, it worked. I don't have to worry about it. And then our function, it'll be like, hey, we got output.
Whew.
So the username is this, and the password is this.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's super convenient, and you can manually load the buffs as you want, and you won't have to worry about, making like a pull request every time you want to add a buff. You can just call the cough command directly by running cough,
I see.
and all of the stuff's here.
And by the way, does that Windows 10 client has heavy running or?
So right now it has Defender.
Yeah, so it's running Defender, right?
Yeah,
So it's
it doesn't have
bypassing.
any like,
Why?
yeah, exactly. And if you're worried about AMC, you can always just run patch it all, and that'll do your AMC bypass for you.
And ETW,
So
right?
that, yeah, exactly. And so let's go ahead and let it do that. We can see, okay, AMC scan buffer is patched, ETW event write is patched. So let's load inject shellcode real quick, so that once we load inject shellcode, that'll also load inject assembly for us, so that we can start loading .NET framework assemblies.
And does inject shellcode works by other defined shellcodes, not only and not only assemble ones? So can I run like
so
a custom shellcode with that command?
Exactly, yes. In a few operations we've done, we've converted Chisel to shellcode so that we could proxy into the environment.
Mhm.
It's honestly one of my favorite things to do.
It sounds fun, yeah.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and inject assembly. So here's seatbelt that a lot of people use. I love seatbelt. Shout out to Harmjoy
Shout out.
for a fantastic tool. And I
Done.
guess the Spectre Ops crew.
Yeah.
And you can specify what your sacrificial process is going to be. And a lot of the other functions are going to be specific to Donut. So your bypass method, any arguments you want to pass to it. So we'll say group user.
So for the guys watching, sacrificial process means that as soon as the function is being done, the process is gonna end, right? The process is gonna be killed.
Yeah, exactly. So this will spawn notepad.exe in suspended state. It'll inject the shellcode into it using the NT map view of section shellcode injection technique. It'll resume the thread and then get the output and then close the application.
So no physical notepad is spawned, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We have a question from one of our stream viewers. Do you do process howling in any of the beacon?
Yeah, so that's what inject assembly / inject shellcode does. It's essentially process howling.
Nice.
So with the inject assembly and inject shellcode, you can specify a parent. In a lot of cases, we like to specify the parent as explorer.exe. I would need to get the pbed for that, which I guess we can do that real quick.
And PS was like getting process, right? Running process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about Mythic, and one thing I really like about it, is it has this process browser and file browser inside of it.
Yeah, that's super huge, yeah.
Yeah, I love that thing. It is fantastic. It is really hard to program for, but using it is fantastic.
Yeah, indeed. And does it generate a lot of like requests and so
on? No, not really.
Because you also have the file browser, which does pretty much the same thing graphically showing the files.
Well, yeah. Every time you request in the file browser, it's going to try to pull that data out of it. Yeah. Sorry, that's the file browser. Process browser. We can go through this and we can see what processes are connected to what, and we can see. Let's find explorer.exe because that's going to be the big one for me. So we see explorer.exe. We also see Athena WebSocket.exe is right here, so we know this is probably the right one.
Yeah.
So we'll set our injection our parent process as that. Let's go ahead and add that file again. Tech group. Back in type. set the parent to that. You can also set block DLLs. This will block any non-Microsoft signed DLLs from attaching to the process. That was useful back before a lot of the EDRs started getting their code signed by Microsoft, but still in some cases it can be useful for you. And we'll just inject it into notepad.exe.
Wait for it.
Yep, we'll let it do its thing real quick.
You have like 10-second beacon callback, right?
Yeah, I should probably speed that up.
There it is.
And so you can see a notepad was spawned to execute seatbelt which is a .NET framework executable in the sacrificial process.
Nice.
We'll just hide that hash real quick.
Yeah.
All right, so we also have execute assembly, which this is going to be the one that you want to run for any .NET 7 based assemblies. So here I converted Sharp DPAPI to Sharp DPAPI core just so that I could run it.
So by converting, you mean just getting the source file and compiling that as .NET Core, right?
Not in all cases, no. Sharp DPAPI I had to make some manual changes to get it to work because it does some stuff with Active Directory, and it uses a library that's no longer found in in .NET 7.
So the current version of the agent is .NET 7, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We're just gonna set the sleep a little less. So this is an execute assembly file that I created. Super easy. It literally just prints console.writeline hello Athena.
Oh, I see.
And with Sharp DPAPI core, it has a requirement on a library called system.security.cryptography.protecteddata.dll. That's how it does a lot of the decryption for DPAPI. So first we'll want to load assembly that, and we'll task it.
It's in DLL, by the way.
What's that?
The file extension is DLL, not DXZ.
Yes, .dll. So .NET, non-self-contained .NET executables are .dlls, and they come with a .exe that is essentially a wrapper that allows them to run it.
I see.
So now that we've loaded the required library for the Sharp DPAPI one, we can go ahead and execute assembly, Sharp DPAPI core, and I wanted to run it with the credentials argument. So this will run Sharp DPAPI against the host. And as you can see, it'll start the user triage and it'll run against the host.
Nice.
So this is an example of a .NET Framework executable that I was able to convert to .NET Core to make it compatible with Athena.
Nice. As far as I see the agent, we are not limited by any way of using it. I mean, we have everything we need during the operation with that agent.
Yeah,
which is super
and
nice.
anything you don't already have, you can. That's the reason that I wrote Athena like this, is I can create it very quickly. So in C#, if I need to throw something together that performs a task against, a domain or whatever, I could write that in a day and just execute it assembly in Athena, and it'll be ready to go.
So you can customize it super quickly and add more stuff and so on.
Exactly.
Do you do obfuscation
and you can see
in
here,
your agent? Yeah, sorry for interrupting.
Sorry?
Yeah. So do you do any obfuscation of your agent before the actual engagement?
So I do during my personal operations. However, I don't have it built into the Athena agent itself.
Yeah, it's no point in doing that.
One thing I'd like to do is Confuser X2 is a really popular .NET obfuscator, and it's used for pretty much everything. Its support for .NET Core and up is kind of sketchy at best. But I know there's like a general proof of concept working for it that I'd like to go and try to implement into Mythic. So that's also on my to-do list of things that I'd like to give a try.
So Confuser X2 works for the agent, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
And so as you can see here, you see how these SMB agents haven't checked in a while?
Yeah.
So that's because the SMB agents, they don't do the traditional get task get response that the egress agents do. This is just to limit the amount of traffic on a network.
Mhm.
However, you can still task them. So let's load who am I, right? And so once the egress agent checks in again, it tasks, okay, who am I? You see that the last check-in's updated.
Oh, nice.
So we can run who am I again, and we'll confirm that it is running in the context of our user.
Why you
And
have to load each command you want to run?
so the commands that I built, I did not include the commands into the binary itself. I probably should have, but I mostly wanted to demonstrate the loading capability
Mhm.
because that was a big concept of Mythic's capabilities, was that it supports the loading of modular commands.
I see. So currently each command you want to run is first needs to be registered, like with the load command.
Exactly.
I see.
Exactly.
Which I believe it's nice for stealthness.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and do this token real quick. So Athena on Windows machines can do token impersonation.
Mhm.
Let me just confirm I have the right
Yep.
functions.
We have a
Username,
question while
password,
we're
domain
looking
name.
at that. So one of the viewers asked, each command is worded into its own effective data. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I forgot. I am on the domain. This is a low privilege user on the domain controller,
Yeah.
which isn't allowed. We'll do that here.
Yeah.
So this is me creating a token in the context of another user.
Mhm.
And as you can see here, Mythic will spin up this new thing and it'll say, okay,
Ooh,
this callback has new tokens
I
that can be
didn't know
used.
that.
Yeah, it's super nice.
Whoa.
And so you can switch your impersonation depending on what token you want to use.
So if you
let's
generate like
say,
5 tokens for 5 different users, you can choose from which one you're gonna operate from here.
exactly.
Poof.
Every task can use a different token.
Whoa.
So if I load who am I and run it, Athena will see that it got a token, it'll impersonate that token and then say, okay, let's use that one. And then if we go back, we'll say, okay, let's stop impersonating. Who are we? We're back to normal.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's a really helpful command. And obviously, my favorite of the things is the file browser.
Yeah.
Just super useful.
Super. So that's the file browser from your beacon, right?
Yeah.
Because
and
I
so
see
I
it's
can
different from the Apple stuff.
Yeah, and I can ls the output right here, and it'll call.
Is that works nice with your egress hosts? And I mean, does it have some kind of differences between HTTP, WebSocket, SMB? How does it fetch files?
I'm sorry?
So does the file browser has any kind of different mechanism if it comes from a SMB host or a WebSocket host or HTTP host and so on?
No, it's all this. Oh, that's why I'm doing it. Sorry. No, it's all the same stuff. It's all the same functionality at the end of the day, no matter what callback it's using.
I see. Nice.
I forgot I was during a remote share, so let me fix that real quick. See users, okay. See users, check commander meteor, refresh it. So it's gonna test that callback, and you see it's all right here. And we can start triaging the file shares or the user shares without
Nice.
ever having to get out of this file browser. Which, if anyone's ever had to ls a bunch of file shares without a file browser,
It's a pain.
it gets annoying
It's a pain,
real
yeah.
quick.
So
Yeah.
one big question, because since you're building this stuff, you kind of know what it does, but it's too much data for me to process right off the bat now. Is there a documentation for all of this stuff?
Yeah, so, well, I've written the documentation. You can see the documentation if you go to the agent and go to docs, and it's all going to be right in here.
Nice. Amazing.
Whether it's fully updated or not is a whole nother question, but I know Jeff McJunkin kind of got on my case about updating my docs, so I recently went through and updated a bunch of it. So it should be relatively up to date.
Nice. That's a huge one, because I see now the agent is capable of a lot of stuff. I'm super impressed by the mechanisms of it.
Yeah, and so you can see all the commands that it supports and the help
Oh,
And so like
you have
what?
snippets, yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
One side question, have you been using the Jupyter in Mythic?
I haven't been,
Do you find it
but
useful?
I would like to do it more.
Yeah.
That's
Because
been on my that's another thing that's on my list. I know my coworker has started messing around with it
Mhm.
and he seems to really enjoy it, but I just haven't done it personally.
Nice. Do you have anything else for the demo, or I'm not sure how much things you prepared.
Um no, I think that's honestly the majority
Nice.
of it.
We have another
Is there
question.
anything you wanted me to demonstrate? Any
First,
questions?
we have questions from a viewer. It also has the Mitre attack mapping like Bruterato. I think it has. I mean, I think Mythic Origin has the mapping stuff.
Yeah, so the nice thing about Mythic is it has the MITRE attack mapping inside of it. So every command, this one's commented out, so I'll just uncomment that. But each one supports attack mapping um, for the MITRE attack framework.
So what
And
that
when you generate a
means,
report through Mythic, it'll all show up right
yeah,
there.
nice. So that means when you run commands, it's gonna map all the commands you run to different maps, right? To Mitre attack mappings.
Exactly. Yeah. There were some growing pains with Mythic 3 where the attack mapping that I had set wasn't working, so that's why that was commented out. But it's fixed now and
I see.
uncommented.
I see. Nice. Thank you so much. In that case, I'm not seeing any more questions from my users, as well as from myself. And in that case, I would like to thank you so much for giving that pure gold in the agent, yeah, and showcase how it really works. You just got me
Yeah,
motivated to just try it out and use that during my engagement. So really appreciate your effort there.
yeah, thanks for having me on. I know you and I talked about you potentially creating your own agent, so
Yeah,
I'm definitely excited to see what you come up with.
yeah. I haven't
And you know, if
I haven't started that, but when I do, it's gonna be the first one to know. Yeah.
yeah, and if you encounter any bugs, I'm pretty active on developing it, mostly because I use it internally too. So I'm very responsive to any bugs that people find. So feel free to just DM me. I'm on Bloodhound Slack. I'm on Twitter. I'm on wherever.
And that's not only for me,
Or
for all
just
the
submit a
guys.
GitHub issue.
If you just find bugs, guys, on the agent, just feel free to hit me or the check commander itself, so we can issue that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much, man. So
Thanks a lot, Lsec.
appreciate everyone, guys, for watching. I hope that was useful as it was to me. So stay tuned for more and have a nice one.